Writing Out Loud, a program designed to explore in-depth interviews with writers to hear that words have voices. Our hostess for today's program is Teresa Miller, Executive Director for the Oklahoma Center for Poets and Writers at OSU Tulsa.
Hello everyone, I'm Teresa Miller and welcome to Writing Out Loud. My very special guest today is best-selling author Cassandra King. Thanks for being here, Cassandra.
Thank you for having me.
In your wonderful book, Making Waves, you begin and end with Donette. How would you describe her to readers who haven't gotten a chance to meet her yet?
Donette is a Southern girl from day one. She's a country girl, and she's a hairdresser. That's where the title comes from, Making Waves, the name of her beauty shop. But she also is making a lot of waves. She's very possessive. She married her childhood sweetheart, and she doesn't want anyone else coming in on her territory.
Why do so many great Southern stories, I'm thinking of Steel Magnolias, Eudora Welty's short story, The Petrified Man, why do they take place in beauty parlors?
Because I think the beauty parlor is central to so many small towns. It's where you go to hear all the gossip. It's where you find out, what's going on in the town. How everybody's going to look for the wedding or the funeral, because that's where they go to get their hair fixed. And so it actually begins with Donette finding out that she needs to go to the funeral parlor and fix the hair of her fourth grade, I think, teacher. But one of her beloved teachers has passed, as we say in the South, and Donette is petrified. She does not want to go fix Miss Maudie's hair.
One of the wonderful things about your writing, and so many Southern writers' writing, is this combination of humor and poignancy and tragedy all sort of blended together. Is that the way you live your life?
It really is. I think that's, I like to think that's the way all of us live our lives. I've noted before that I think you're in real trouble when you can't laugh about something, when you can't find the humor, and there's certainly plenty of things that are not humorous. I don't mean to imply that at all, but so many times that we can just find the humor in some of the more absurd things in life, then it gets us through it. And I think that you find that so much in dark humor too.
Yes.
In Southern, because the dark humor then is the blend of the pathos and the hilarious sometimes. Something can seem so tragic, and you see that it's you wonder if it's a tragedy or a comedy.
Making Waves was originally called Making Waves in Zion. What is it about this little small town community that, at least in the beginning, gave it title status?
I originally titled the book Making Waves in Zion because there was it's based on set in a small town in Alabama where I lived for a few years, and there was a little community there called Zion Community. And I just thought that was a neat name. They had just a little country store. It was called Zion Mall. And so I thought of the whole area as so stereotypical small town deep South. It was just perfect for it. And so I called the area Zion, and the beauty shop was Making Waves in Zion. Plus, the characters were making plenty of waves as well. As the book was first published by a small press and then bought by my publisher in New York, and when they reprinted it, they just called it Making Waves. And I think as the Middle East became more in the news, the connotation of Zion took on a different something that they had decided it might be misclassified.
Well, that's a good point. I hadn't even thought about that because I was so plugged into what you do. Once you read the book, you understand the importance of Zion. Would you agree with what Southern writer Flannery O'Connor said, that you focus on a region, the South in your case, to show what transcends it?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, and that's what we have in this. We have characters in this book, and I think in all my books, who love the South, love the region, but also long to escape it and long to transcend it, and to get away from some of the things that are not so good about small town living, the isolation, the in some ways self-absorption, that and not knowing or particularly caring what's going on in the rest of the world, and these kinds of things. So I have a mixture of characters who are both drawn to and repelled by their upbringing.
I mentioned Flannery O'Connor, Eudora Welty, there's Carson McCullers, all these great Southern women writers that are just a generation or two removed from you. Do you look at them in a way as your literary foremothers?
Oh, definitely, yes. When I first discovered these women, first started reading, and I couldn't get enough. I really, and I couldn't decide. I'd go from week to week deciding who was my new favorite. I would be drawn to Flannery O'Connor for some of her, the darkness, that kind of appeal to the dark side of me, and the grotesque and so forth, and then I discovered Catherine M. Porter. I always loved, but then Miss Eudora kept coming back to for just the basics of humanity, whether it's the South or whatever.
I think she's a great model for all of us. Do you think if she had been a male writing at that time, she would have gotten more recognition? Of course, she did get a lot of recognition, but even more so than
probably so. They were certainly trailblazers when there were not that many prominent women writers. I think very few on a national scale, certainly from the South.
You use multiple first-person narrators to tell the story-making ways. Is that just a natural way for you?
I want to tell all my books with multiple narrators, and even considered it in my second novel, which I didn't use multiple narrators. I have in two of my books, and then my fourth book that's coming out, I used a first-person narrator, just one. But I love I'm taken with the idea of an event, which is what I did in Making Waves. There's an accident that happens in this small town, and it affects the lives of so many people in the town. Between an automobile accident where these two young men are involved, and I just loved looking at this from different perspectives and see how different characters reacted, how it affected them, and how you could read. I also love with the multiple narrators, you read and you see exactly where this character's coming from, and you can see why they don't like this other character, or what this character's done to hurt them or whatever. And then you read another, you go into the next narrator, and then you understand that person's point of view. So there's an empathy that I think that you get that maybe we all need more of.
I would agree with you, and I think growing up in a small town, that's the way I always heard stories. They came to me in little bits and pieces.
They come that way to us, and you hear this person's perspective, and someone comes in and tells you about an accident. Then you hear the other, and you, ultimately you have to form your own judgments as to what happened and who is the truth teller.
Is there any sort of special challenge for you technically with that? Do the voices sometimes overlap?
Oh, definitely. It's a very difficult thing to do. As a matter of fact, I didn't have as much trouble with it in Making Waves because I used male voices, female voices. I used a young woman in her early 20s. I used an elderly woman in her 80s. They were all very different. When my book that's out now, The Same Sweet Girls, I wanted very much to tell it in multiple voices, but these were all women from the same background, basic background, same age, and it was very difficult to I did not think it would be that difficult because I gave them three, I thought, distinct personalities, but I didn't hear their voices as that differently.
You mentioned writing as a male narrator. Are you comfortable with that?
Yes, I was comfortable with it. I don't know now if I would try it again. When I wrote the book, I was much younger. I raised three boys. And so I told this from the view of a 19 or 20-year-old young man. And my oldest son was not quite that age at that time, but I had been around, taught school, had been around young people that age, and I felt like I knew, the way they talked and some of the way they thought and so forth from having sons and their friends.
And do you think writing from that perspective maybe helped you understand your sons a little better?
Yes,
even?
I do. Yes.
You mentioned your second novel, The Sunday Wife. Tell us about Sunday Wives.
I myself was a Sunday wife for almost 2 decades. In my previous life, I was married to a minister, and I was, in some ways, I was born and bred to be a preacher's wife because I was raised in a small town, and the church was our whole life. The church and the school, that's all the basis of our social life. That's all that went on in the small town. And but I noted that the minister and his family lived in a fishbowl, and everything they did and said was commented on. And I always thought to myself, what a life. I would never want to do that. As fate will come into our lives, I fell in love with a young man in theology school, and so ended up in a role that I was not suited for in a lot of ways. I, as a writer, require a lot of solitude. Life in a fishbowl, is not exactly the life of a writer. And so I started writing about that experience, but I was more journaling and keeping up, just never knowing that this. Not sure if I would ever actually write about what it was like to be a Sunday wife. But eventually, and after my marriage failed, and I had been away long enough to get some perspective and look back, I pulled out those journals and turned it into this novel. And it's fictionalized. There's a lot of it that's highly fictionalized, but I wanted to share the story of a woman who's searching for her own identity at a time when her identity is so tied in with her husband's and the expectations of the community. And I thought, she's a Sunday wife, she's a minister's wife, but she could be a politician's wife, she could be the coach's wife, she could be a corporate wife whose identity is not separate from that of her husband.
I mentioned to you yesterday evening that I had a chance a few months ago to interview Suma Kidd, who has such wonderful things to say about your novels. I mean, she just is a huge fan of yours, and of course I'm a huge fan of both yours and hers. But, I wondered if you had read her memoir, The Dance of the Dissident
Love it. I totally love it.
I thought, I bet Cassandra has read that, because in many ways Sue was a Sunday wife.
She is a Sunday wife. Her husband Sandy is a ordained minister. He was a counselor for many years, but they did serve churches for a while, so she certainly knows about the life of a preacher's wife.
As you mentioned earlier, this book is not told with multiple first-person narrators, but you've got this great prologue where you set the book up. And I'm a writer, and that's the hardest thing to do. How hard was it for you to write this prologue and set the tone for your novel?
It was difficult because one thing is I didn't want to have a prologue. It was prologues. It was an interesting thing because I also taught writing, and in creative writing, I would tell my students, watch out for trends, in writing. For a while, the trend of writing in second person, which sort of tends to get on my nerves after a while, I think, when you're reading it, or writing just maybe one long narrative where you don't even have pauses, just inner, monologue and all these different trends. And so prologues became it's sort of trendy for a while, about the time that I was putting this in the form of a book. But it was the only thing that really worked, because what in the structuring the book, I wanted this to show this woman, my central character, Dean, the minister's wife, who had gotten away from her life somehow, as I had, and was looking back over where she had been and how she got there, and I just had to have a prologue to do that.
Well, this has been described as a page turner for readers. What made it a page turner for you as a writer?
Oh, it was not a page turner for me.
Did you have some slow days with it?
No, I didn't really. It almost told itself. But it was written, as I mentioned, by putting a novel together from some of my own experiences and some of the writing, journaling that I had done and so forth. So it fell into place fairly well then, except the parts that I had to fictionalize. I don't know what makes a book a page turner. I'd love to know. I mean, if I knew the formula, I would be glad to share it. Because when I read myself, I don't know why there's some books that I do not want to put down. I think it's maybe you get so engaged with the characters. Mm-hmm. If you can identify with a character to a point that you want to know what happens to this character, that you cannot wait to see if the character is resolving a dilemma or placed in a situation, that must be what does it.
The book's dedicated to your husband, novelist Pat Conroy, and you describe him as more than a Sunday husband and someone who's given you a room with a view. How so? It's a great literary illusion, but how so?
When Pat and I married, I had not realized how wonderful it would be to be married to another writer. As a matter of fact, I even took that into consideration as being more of a detriment. Sure. Especially, I had pretty much just started. I had published a novel and several short stories, and at the beginning of my career, I knew I'd have to be very careful to keep our identities separate, and I don't. Mm-hmm. I don't mm-hmm. use his name. I ended up having to on my website because someone had already gotten CassandraKing.com, but and so I didn't have a choice. But Pat and I think doesn't have to be another writer. I'm not sure, but understands that a writer has to create a world in his or her mind, and has to inhabit that world, and you're not always available. You're not always available emotionally. A lot of times you're off in this other world, even if you're not literally working, and so it's worked out very well for us to understand, that we have our separate identities, and we are free to say, I don't want to go to dinner tonight, or could I just have some time to myself for a few days? I may not come out of my writing room for a while, and so I think symbolically as well as literally. I created my own writing room.
Do you read each other's work in progress?
Not in progress. No, I cannot let anyone read. My editor and I've had numerous squabbles about this. She will, please send me your first 100 pages, or let me see what you're doing. I write to discover, I think, and now talking about the Southern writers, I can't remember which one. I think it was Flannery O'Connor who said I know Eudora said she didn't. How did she know what she was going to say until she saw it?
Yes.
And yeah, so I think I do some of that too. I certainly have in my mind where the book is going to start. I know how it's going to end. I'm not always sure what detours it will take on the way, and I can't let anyone read what I have until I've seen it myself.
Oh, I understand that totally. Earlier you mentioned your latest book, The Same Sweet Girl. Narrators here are just terrific. How autobiographical is this? Because you have your close-knit group of female friends.
Yes, I actually belong to a group called The Same Sweet Girls. And we went to college together. It's a small school for women in Alabama. And I always thought that I would write our story one day. I wasn't sure how, what form that would take or whatever. But because we shared so many life experiences together, so I have these 6 women in The Same Sweet Girls who are all approaching middle age. Their 50th birthday is looming. They've raised their families. They're looking at, some cases, the empty nest. And each of them are sort of at a crisis in their lives. And I thought that this would be an experience that a lot of readers would identify with. I did. It was a concern, not a major one by any means, because I don't think you can do this as a writer, but I did, have to think, would this in any way be anything that a male writer, a male reader would appeal to? So I was delighted when one of my first reviews was from a male reviewer in the Charleston paper, who said reading this was like reading the other team's game book, that he learned more about women reading in The Same Sweet Girl. So that helped me, because I think we have to be aware. Once you ever write, then you do become aware of your audience. You cannot let it be the controlling factor in your writing, but you become aware of it.
When you have these 6 narrators, do you as a writer have one that you can always count on to advance the story if you need to? I mean, did you find yourself thinking that way?
Yes, you do. As I say, I always have to have sort of a central narrator. In The Same Sweet Girls, I have the artist. What I tried to do with these women are sort of do prototypes, and I have an artist. I have an aristocratic, very reserved woman who is a politician's wife, the governor's wife. And then I have this, what my mother would have called a sight. This woman who's one of these sassy Southern women that just speaks before she even thinks. And at first I was kind of thinking of her as maybe sort of comic relief. One of my reviewers says she had the best lines in the book. But then you find out she has a very, tragic life herself, and she's a lot of this is to cover up some of her pain.
Well, you've got built-in conflict and irony in the title, because you can't stay the same and sweet forever. I mean, it gets harder and harder, doesn't it, Cassandra? That's for me.
Well, what I liked about the notion, and we chose this. We call ourselves The Same Sweet Girls. I describe it in the book. This actually happened based on an incident that happened in when we were in college together, but I loved the idea that we were all raised to be sweet. That's what my mother
and unselfish
and sacrificing, but you know, a lady just doesn't say certain things and doesn't even think them. But if she thinks them, she certainly keeps them to herself, because you got to be sweet if nothing else. And so it's a struggle. You're always trying to be the same sweet, and girl too, not one, but the same sweet girl that you were raised to be. And some people, I think I have one of the women in there who you know will be the same sweet girl, the beauty queen, all of her life, because that's her identity.
Ann Rivers has complimented on the book and said, by saying it's astonishingly unsentimental. How hard was it for you to write about friendships that mean a lot to you and not get all warm and fuzzy?
That was the challenge too. There are a lot of books about women's friendships, and that is there again. I'm talking about my audience, but somewhat a hesitation for me, because I thought. Another warm and fuzzy book about women's friendships. But I thought I could do this in an unsentimental way if I really revealed the way we were not very sweet at times, the way our friendship has so many ups and downs. There are times when maybe you don't even like these people, you know?
Exactly.
That we all see each other's flaws and are not very sweet when we point them out. And so I've had some comments about, good heavens, these women were not sweet at all, were they? No, we're not.
Strong. They're strong. And that's the important word. It's been so wonderful having you on the show today. We're all going to look forward to reading your new novel, The Queen of Broken Hearts. Thank all of you for joining us on Writing Out Loud.